Welcome to Art Talk, the place where we agree to disagree, maybe. Today, my guest is Claire O'Shea. She is in Seattle, and our topic is two practices. Hello, Claire. Welcome to my little talk show. It's lunchtime where you are. You've had a busy morning already?
Yes.
Good for you. Claire, I want to introduce you in a moment. Just so you know, we are going to talk about two practices today. Well, we've agreed on that, obviously, but just so you know that I, in my mind, have prepared basically two directions of our conversation. One direction would be two practices, the agility, the flexibility that gives, the inclusiveness that entails. And the other avenue would be two practices. They can be a conflict of interest or divided loyalties even. So these are basically the two avenues, and you will be able later to choose which one we start with. Is that okay with you?
Okay.
Good. I want to introduce you, and before I do that, dear viewers, I'm very excited to have Claire here because I'm intrigued by this personality and by our topic we have. I think the topic potentially could be explosive. I'm confident that we are having a very nice conversation, but it should be quite exciting. A small public relation note, please sign up for our YouTube channel. You see the button down there somewhere during the video. And of course, if you want to subscribe to our newsletter, please feel free to do so. It's free of charge. So let me introduce Claire to you. Claire has been teaching and practicing Reiki as an Usui Shiki Ryoho Reiki master since 1988. She is an elder in the Reiki community, and I'm extremely happy to have a person with so much background here. And as we will find out, there's more to Claire, which is exciting. She joined the Reiki Alliance in 1989. Claire has also trained in Chikiden Reiki, a Japanese form of Usui Reiki. And since 2010, she is a Chikiden Reiki Shihan, or teacher, associated with the Chikiden Reiki Institute in Kyoto, Japan. Claire runs the Emerald City Reiki Center. In the center, Reiki treatments are offered and regular classes in Chikiden Shoden, the first degree, and Okuden, the second degree. The center also offers an apprenticeship of Usui Shiki Ryoho mastery level on a very individual basis. Now, Claire, welcome again. I hope I have covered approximately your biography very briefly. Please add as you choose. Please correct my pronunciation of your name. And also, please tell me why Emerald Center?
Seattle is known as the Emerald City.
Oh.
And I also teach Usui Shiki Ryoho first degree and second degree, not just Reiki Mastery apprenticeship.
Okay, all right. In the description of the video, there will be a link to your center. I was intrigued because when I made the transition from commodity trading business world to become a Reiki teacher, at that time I didn't know it yet. My wife and I had a art shop with visual art and with jewelry, and of course emeralds being one of the big four. So I was intrigued by your center being called the Emerald Center. Claire, should we first look a little bit at the word practices, just so that you and I and also our viewers have approximately the same idea? And if I look up practices, well, let me ask you, what's your definition of the word practice?
A practice is a particular method in this case, of teaching Reiki. The Sui Shiki Ryoho and Jikiden Reiki involve the same Reiki, but they are totally different methods of teaching it.
Okay, very good. There in everyday's language, the word practice, of course, has a number of different meanings. But one of them is referring to, for example, spiritual practices. And to me, Reiki isn't exclusively a spiritual practice. It's actually a holistic practice, body, mind, and soul, so to speak. But it says, in the definition, these are activities undertaken for the purpose of spiritual unfolding or development. A metaphor often used is that of walking a path. That's often used in terms of religion towards a goal. And I think the goal in the practice we are talking about, or the practices within Reiki, the goal I would define as holistic healing. How about you? What's the goal of our practices?
Well, for me, Reiki is a profound meditation. I didn't start out in Reiki with any goal. I simply experienced it in a meditation class. The person who taught the class brought in someone who demonstrated Reiki, and the theory that was put forward was that everyone has Reiki. It's just a matter of focus. It's a lot more than that. But yeah. As it happened, I was the person demonstrating had people break up into pairs, and I was the odd person out, and the person who was demonstrating demonstrated on me. And I had received some spiritual guidance earlier saying I needed yoga and meditation, and I could never really get into meditation. And I had taken this meditation course to see if there was, something besides staring at candles and chanting a particular mantra. And when this person put their hand just above my head, they didn't touch my head, I was blown away. I thought, okay, this is my meditation. And Reiki has been my meditation ever since. I've studied other meditation techniques, but for me, Reiki is it. I didn't set out to become a Reiki master. I didn't set out to become a Jikiden Reiki Shion. But my experience is that Reiki takes you where you need to go. And so it happened very quickly for me. I took first degree Reiki in 1887, and I became a Reiki master in 1888. There were always, and I practiced it for 26 years before taking Jikiden Reiki. There were always questions that I had. For instance, the use of the mental emotional technique. What was that for? What did it do? My experience of it when people treated me was that it was calming. That was it. In Jikiden Reiki, it's a particular method of the mental emotional treatment, which is focused on getting rid of a bad habit, anxiety, depression, and there are particular Japanese words Kodadama involved that were never involved in the Reiki I originally learned. I didn't, and when I took Shoden and Okuden from Mr. Yamaguchi, he said, don't change what you're doing, just go with it, but don't mix them up, don't create a hybrid of them. And so I don't. When I teach first degree and second degree or Shoden and Okuden, it is the student's choice which they want to learn. And, I do a lot of distant treating using both the Jikiden and Kaku, which just means distant treatment, but it's a particular method. And what I learned in Usui Shiki Ryoho. And recently, when I wasn't feeling well, we have this tradition in the Reiki Alliance version of Usui Shiki Ryoho of having a support line, and people can ask for treatment. And I put it out on the support line and was amazed because overnight what was wrong with me went away, just disappeared. So it's not that one method is better than the other. It's just one method has a completely different focus. And they both work. And the longer you practice Reiki, the more you know that. They work in a similar way.
When I do these talks and I speak to representatives from all sorts of styles, and actually all the people who have ever been on my show, they were Reiki personalities, whether they're Reiki 1 or Reiki teacher, doesn't matter. But some of them were seasoned Reiki masters. I'm thinking of Rajava Petter as an example, or of William Rand, to use another example, and many more. And when and also when I did the video a long time ago outside the Art Talks, the documentary of Phyllis Furumoto, when I did a lot of research and I spoke to 100, literally 100, it's actually a few more, Reiki personality all over the world. And the one thing, they were always in agreement with each other. At the end of the day, that's my language now, at the end of the day, the bottom line, the Reiki itself is always the same. So that was very interesting to hear and very conciliating, actually, to hear that. And of course, the practices, they may different in tradition, in knowledge, in applications, in a number of ways. And this is one of the reasons why I was really keen to speak to you, because particularly of your generation, if I may say so, I'm just a little bit younger in terms of Reiki than you are, but so I should say in our generation almost. It is not so often that people have gone and also learned, like you have, another practice. Very often we were very set in one way. I still practice Usui Shiki Ryoho, like I learned some 40 years ago. And so that nothing has changed. I have informed myself, I am in communication with people like you, and I learn, but in terms of practice, this is it, as far as I'm concerned. I have nothing else to offer to my students. So to speak to you, who has for a while now been, I would like to say, the owner of two different practices, in your own right, the owner, in your own practice, personal practice. This is very, very exciting and interesting. And of course, it begs the question which I brought up at the beginning: is there conflict of interest, or is it the other thing, which is the agility, the enrichment of two practices? So, which avenue should we take first, Claire? Conflict of interest and divided loyalty, or rather the agility and the mutually beneficial?
Well, what I would say is my practice of Jikiden Reiki has enriched my Usui Shiki Ryoho. I don't combine the two. I don't see myself as the owner of the practice. I've simply learned the practice. I'm a follower of the practice. I have strong things to say about each of them, but there it's the structure of the for instance, my experience has been in the Reiki Alliance. The structure between the two methods is totally different. In Jikiden Reiki, Mr. Yamaguchi says the way it goes. It's his lineage, and he says the way it goes. In the Usui Shiki Ryoho, I learned a lot of people felt entitled, drawn to change what they originally learned. I never had that drive. I've always felt I've known many Reiki masters who really got into getting massages as opposed to a Reiki treatment, and wanting to do more physical things than what they felt Reiki offered. But that wasn't my experience of it. My experience of it was that it is transformational, and there's I may have said it already, but there's a saying: Reiki takes you where you need to go. So, in my way of thinking, I needed to go and learn Jikiden Reiki, and it was hard for me because I had spent 26 years never saying Reiki symbols out loud. You were supposed to think them, but never say them out loud. And in Jikiden Reiki, they're at least mouthed. There's the distant Jumon is a mantra, which involves the union of body, speech, and mind, which is a Buddhist concept that makes a lot of sense. So there was a learning curve. But again, I feel that people are drawn to whatever version of Reiki they're drawn to, and it's up to them. They have to make the decision. It isn't that I need to sell it to them.
So that's basically your answer or your resolution of a potential conflict. In fact, you personally don't have a conflict between the two styles. And one resolution is, if I understand you correctly, and this is a question to correct my understanding, I understand that you're basically leaving it to your student to feel drawn and attracted to one or the other, and then you go with that which the student or the client who wants to have a treatment. Is there also a differentiation there for you, where you have to choose in the application when you give a Reiki treatment? What do you say?
I don't treat people differently. When I give a Reiki treatment, it's me giving the Reiki treatment. I use my method. And I don't ask what type do you want an Usui Shiki Ryoho treatment, or do you want a Jikiden Reiki treatment? I decide that.
Because the Reiki at the end is
It's the
Reiki
same.
is Reiki is Reiki. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same, and it's done the same way. It's not. There's not something markedly different about a Jikiden Reiki treatment and a Usui Shiki Ryoho treatment. I think the advantage of having practiced Reiki for so long is that I bring to it a certain strength in transmitting Reiki that a first degree, even a first degree Jikiden, a Shoden student, or a first degree Suishiki Ryoho student can't possibly have. And it's all practice, practice, practice. So yeah, I think it's up to the student. And maybe it's from my legal background that I feel people should just make choices. If I interpret the law to someone, they need to make a choice. Of course, if they don't follow what I'm going to say legally, I won't be their lawyer. I won't be doing that. It's different in Reiki. It's a spiritual practice that people are drawn to. I've met many Jikiden Reiki practitioners and Shions and Dai Shions who are of Japanese descent, and for them, Jikiden Reiki is the only way. It jives with their culture.
I'm not surprised about that.
Yeah, but there are a whole lot of other people in the world besides the Japanese and people of Japanese descent.
The other thing I found in the last decades, and particularly in this reconciliation work, speaking to so many people who do have different practices, I found very often, for example, something you said earlier when you said in your Usui Shiki Ryoho tradition, you didn't chant the names of the symbols. And in my Usui Shiki Ryoho tradition, we actually do that too. And I found over the years and years that often there are differences which are more perceived than they are real, that even not only the Reiki, the energy itself, but the actual practices, they're very often much, much closer and more similar than one thinks at the first glance. Do you find that too, or do you still see major differences?
Oh no, they're not major differences. Not saying the symbols or shirushi or the distant Jumon out loud are details. But certainly when a person is alone, I would think that they're free to chant them. I never was drawn to do that. I was just drawn to think them. And I don't think it should be taught that way. You obviously learned a different type of Suishiki Ryoho than I did. Details are different. Chanting the symbols or the shirushi, to me, is not a big deal. One way or the other, it's not something reprehensible, or I think it might be positive, but I was never drawn to do that, and I wasn't trained to do that.
To be clear, we don't teach that this needs to be done. It is, if you want, optional. It's a application. But like you say, and I wouldn't like to be lost in details, because these are relatively superficial details, I think, at the end of the day.
Well, I participated in a recent Reiki Alliance conference, and among other masters, they do chant the
Yeah.
Shiroshi and just
Yeah. Yeah.
and even and even what's called the master symbol. But that's only in a group that are all on the same level.
Who are all privy to the details of that technique and that knowledge.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So, talking to you, I don't feel that in your experience and in your practice that you have a problem practicing two styles, having two practices. It seems to be, if I listen to you, very compatible, very mutually, not as in the practice itself, but for you as a teacher, it gives you a lot more arrows, a lot more possibilities to deal with your students, and you're empowering your students that they're making their own choices. So you're of better or of a more broader service to them. So that's all nice and fine. How about you internally at the beginning? Were you having, when you started in 2010, I believe you became a Shihan in Jikiden Reiki.
Yes.
At the beginning, did you have the feeling, oh, now I need to do only one thing and I have to deny the other, or even
No.
I can't tell people? Were you
No,
always
you take yourself into it. It's transformational, but you're the person. You take your own history into it. I had in 2005, I had stage 4 ovarian cancer. I had a whole support line of people treating me every time I had a chemotherapy infusion. And Sui Shiki Ryoho Reiki got me through ovarian cancer. I don't have it. It brought me a drug trial, which worked. So, I've never had a conflict. You may not agree with me, but when I teach someone after having taken Jikiden Reiki, when I teach someone who wants to become an Usui Shiki Ryoho Reiki master, I require that they take Shodan and Okuden, Jikiden Reiki Shodan and Okuden. I require that they get another view because I think it's enriching. And that's the way I teach it. And again, they're free not to agree to that.
I don't disagree with that at all. I cannot offer that to my students because I'm single-minded, so to speak. But I don't have a problem with your practice, because what I clearly get from you, it's always empowering the student to take his own decision. Because if he or she doesn't like your condition, and says, I want to be exclusively Usui Shiki Ryoho, and you're not prepared to do that, well, there's the door. He can get up and walk out, or she, and she's her own master of her destiny.
Well, I happen to know more than a few Usui Shiki Ryoho masters in the Reiki Alliance who have taken Jikiden Reiki. It's not, I'm not an outlier.
Oh, no.
Or maybe I am an outlier, but there are other people who are drawn to it.
My wife and I trained many years ago a Reiki master in Usui Shiki Ryoho, and he felt he went to Japan and he did Jikiden Reiki with Tadao Yamaguchi, and he became a Shihan eventually. I know firsthand.
Mhm.
However, what I also know is that there was like a conflict in the sense of what are you doing now? Are you doing both, or are you doing one? Shouldn't you make up your mind and commit to one and not to both? You're indecisive. This is the kind of decisions which the person had to make or was confronted with internally, and externally we had that conversation. And to be honest, I at that time didn't have such a lenient, flexible attitude as I have today, and as I hear from you, Claire. I was more like, well, you've learned one thing with me. You can teach both. I recommend that you always make clear what you're teaching and don't develop a hybrid new style on your own. That was the same thing as Tadao Yamaguchi said to you. But at that time, it was more in the air and in the zeitgeist, one or the other. You can't be, it says in the Bible, you can't be the servant of two masters kind of thing. Um,
I'm not a
and,
big
and,
Bible person.
and this thing,
There are many. That's still a conflict in the Reiki Alliance. At this last Reiki Alliance conference, I was questioned about it. Well, what is it you're doing? By people I've known in Reiki for 33 years. With an edge that what I was doing was not right, and that's something I don't accept. Uh, it's not that I don't care at all what people think of me, but I don't. And in regard to my Reiki mastery, uh, my being a Jikiden Reiki teacher, I don't care. It's I've been blessed with that. you know, Lack of needing approval, and I think a Reiki master or a Jikiden Reiki Shion or Dai Shion needs to do what they're drawn to do. And there's no right or wrong as long as you do it with integrity.
wow, wow, that's almost a beautiful closing of today's conversation. That's really goosebumps and everything,
Well,
and this is why I was fascinated to talk to you. You are very much embodying this staying in your own integrity, and being able to hold Bruce Lee, in an interview with Trevor Noah, said it's a sign of maturity to hold two contradicting thoughts in one's mind at the same time. Comes to my mind too, and I'm not suggesting that the practices are contradictory, but it is a sign of maturity, and you put it very well in terms of talk a little more about what is the integrity of a Shihan, a Reiki teacher. I'm using these words interchangeable synonym for each other right now. Speak a little bit to us about your take on integrity.
well, I feel I have to be honest about uh, recently or this last weekend. One of my sisters who is has COPD was in the hospital with COVID, and I treated her distantly using the Jikiden Reiki method of distant treatment, and she's now at home. Uh, it's highly effective, but it's not different. One of the things that I like about the Reiki Alliance version of Sui Shiki Ryoho that I learned was the tradition of treating people distantly, even if you don't know them. They don't have to be relatives. For me, there's a certain uh, measure that in Jikin and Reiki you're supposed to know. But for me, I only need to be able to envision the person and know their name. That's it. But that's from practicing Reiki for 33 years.
Yeah.
And I never recommend that to a student, either as a first degree student. Well, in first degree, you don't do distant treatment. It's a second degree student that you do distant treatment. And it's the same in Jikiden Reiki. The Shoden student does not learn distant treatment. The Oguden student learns distant treatment. It's just that's what I'm drawn to do. And if someone asks me, well, what is your practice? Well, when it comes to distant treatment, I throw everything at it but the kitchen sink. I do it both ways. you know, um, I don't differentiate. I don't think one is better than the other. I'm inclined to do it one way one time, but with my sister, I was treating her with the Jigiden method because it was life and death, and I found that in life and death situations, that's what works for me. It gets the result I want. But what also gets the result I want is putting out requests for Jikiden and Kaku treatment and also for Suishiki Ryoho treatment on all of the private Facebook pages I'm in. So I can't say that my sister is home just because I treated her with Jikiden Reiki and Kaku treatment. I don't think it matters. I think it's every individual staying in integrity is doing what you believe is right, and not. You need to decide it for yourself. You don't rely on someone you feel is older and wiser, and. And at my age, you can't get much older. So it's like,
Claire, this is wonderful. I'd like to come to an end in our conversation, but not without giving you the space and time you want to say whatever you want. To close this session, how was it for you? Do you have some parting thoughts on two practices? Maybe even you want to address our viewers who I'm sure are practicing a lot of things, not just the two practices we were talking about with Reiki and even beyond Reiki, other practices, because the topic is absolutely translatable into other methodologies outside of Reiki. This is not an exclusively Reiki question. So your parting word.
Yeah, what I would say is, I do two methods. I've never been into changing the Reiki I learned. I believe that people learn the Reiki they learn because they're supposed to. And if they're for instance, if you are not drawn to learn Jikiden Reiki, you're not supposed to. And it's not a matter of need. It's a matter of your individual human development.
Sure. I'd like to come a close. I'd like to thank you very much, Claire, for your time. And thank you very much. And bye-bye for now.
Well, thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Dear viewers, thank you. And as I said, kindly subscribe. And I hope that you will be there in 3 weeks' time when we have again an art talk with the place where we agree to disagree. Bye bye. Until then.